Hello everybody, welcome to ChinFat. And this episode, this is part two in like three little episodes I'm doing here on kind of prepping a project and on increasing your speed, getting your, if you've got kind of a slower computer, you need to be able to edit faster. This previous episode, the one that I did previous to this episode was on transcoding footage to more of an optimized footage. That takes up a lot of hard drive space. So this one I'm showing you how to do the proxy workflow, the proprietary proxy workflow within Premiere, and then the next episode will briefly show how to do the old school method. And first of all, I probably need to explain what proxy editing is. Basically, you're taking, if you have really large files and high quality footage and your computer's having a hard time playing footage back, so you have some red footage and you play it back and it gets all chuggy and really difficult to play back because it's high quality, especially maybe like 4K footage or above 4K footage, and your computer can't handle the processing, then you can encode your footage. You basically make a mirror of your footage, and then you edit with that mirrored footage that's lesser quality, that's smaller resolution, that doesn't have as much color depth, and it will edit a lot smoother. And then when you're done, you relink it to the high quality footage for exporting and color grading and other items. So Premiere has a proprietary proxy workflow within their software. There are two different methods, and sometimes you want to use the proprietary version and sometimes you want to use the old school. And if you're using the proprietary version, keep in mind that you're going to have on the same hard drive, you have to basically have access to the high quality footage and the lower quality proxy footage at the same time. If you're using the old school method, say you're working in a kind of a studio environment and you want to take those proxies and go home and edit with just the proxies, and you don't want to transfer over all the high quality footage, and it takes forever to transfer. So you can just transfer over the proxy footage, go edit at home, but the proprietary method does not let you do that. Your computer has to have access to both the high quality and the low quality footage at the same time. So this is the one we're showing first, is the proprietary method. Now what I've got here is I've got three different types of media here. I've got some 1920 by 1080 footage shot on a 5D Mark III. I've got some drone footage that just has that has no audio link to it, it's just the video, and then I've got red footage, which is this 4K footage here. But these are three different footage. Luckily, all these are the same frame rate. If you're going to be running into different frame rates, it can get a little bit complex where you may have to conform some footage. I'm not getting into that right now, I'm just going through the basics of this. But before you start encoding, what I've got here are three different media types, and what you got to recognize, because when you make proxy footage, you've got to make it basically be a mirror of your high quality footage, but you're going to change things like resolution, and you're going to remove color information as well, which would bring the size of your file down significantly. But what I mean by a mirror of your footage is you have to duplicate, usually it's not super important, but it's nice if you duplicate aspect ratio. This is 1920 by 1080, so it's 1920 pixels by horizontally by 1080 pixels up and down. That difference in the amount of pixels that you have is going to give you what is called your aspect ratio. What we're going to do is simplify the smaller number down to 1, and then figure out what this number will simplify down to get what your final aspect ratio is. You can do that with a calculator. Calculator, you're going to divide the higher number, 1920, divided by the lower number, 1080, and now we've got 1.78 to 1. That basically means for every 1.78 pixels going across, you have 1 pixel up and down. So that simplified the 1080 to 1, and it brought this down to 1.78 to 1 proportionally. If you have more pixels horizontally, you're going to have a wider aspect ratio, as is the case with this DJI footage, which was shot in true 4K. 4096 by 2160. Let's see what this one is. I'm guessing this is going to be a little bit wider. 4096 divided by 2160, and it is 1.89 to 1. That's kind of a cinema aspect ratio there. Whereas 1.78 to 1, it's also in whole numbers. It's also called 16 by 9. 16 pixels across for every pixels up and down, for every 9 pixels up and down. Gives you is really built for computer screens, for cell phones, for television sets. But if you're going to be showing things in the cinema, that aspect ratio usually begins with 1.89 to 1. So I intentionally have two different aspect ratios here, just to show you what you're going to have to do to encode these to proxy footage. So this is a 16 by 9, so that's the first thing I suggest you figure out, is what is your aspect ratio of each type of footage we're using. From the 5D, it is 16 by 9 or 1.77 or 1.78 if you're rounding up to 1. The DJI is 1.89 to 1, and now our red footage is this is UHD. This is twice the resolution of 1920 by 1080. So this is going to be also 1.78 to 1, but just to prove it, let's go 3840 divided by 2160, and you get 1.78 to 1. So these two here and here have the same aspect ratio. This one does not. So we're going to have to make an encode preset for each one of these cameras, for the 5D, for the drone, and for the red, because we've got three different types of footage. Another thing you got to recognize is the audio nature of each file. First of all, the 5D Mark III. You just don't want to use a stereo file for everything, because it's going to, if it tries to relink later, it's going to have issues if it doesn't match the same audio properties. And what I mean by the audio properties is this right here. It's got a stereo. That means it's got basically a single track of audio that has two channels on it, a left and right channel. So on the same track, if we drag this down into a timeline, you see that you've got one single track of audio right there. That's a track of audio, but it has two channels. It has a left channel and a right channel. If we zoom this up, you can see it says L and R for your left speaker and your right speaker. It's got two channels on the same track. So it's, once again, single track with two channels. So that's the nature of that audio file right there. As we go to the red footage, it has two mono channels. And this actually didn't have a microphone plugged into the camera, but it just recorded those anyway, so there's no audio waveforms on this. But this does, by its very nature, have two audio channels here. But this, by its very nature, has two audio tracks. Let's go in and take a look at that here. So you have channel 1 and channel 2. Notice that these are not on the same track. These are two separate tracks, and channel 1 is on its own track and channel 2 is on its own track. So you have two separate channels of audio. So basically that is not like this is not a stereo file. This is two mono channels, which means each channel of audio is delivering audio to both speakers, to both your left and right speakers, rather than one to the left and one to the right. So we got to keep that in mind. So that is the very nature of this file. We don't want to say it's a stereo file, or it will not be able to relink to your high quality footage later on. Your DJI, lucky us, has no audio. It just has that little video, that little film strip there, which means it has video and no audio properties at all. So the two major things we're keeping in mind here are aspect ratio and your audio, and the nature of the audio of each individual camera that we have of these three different cameras. All right, and preparation for this begins in Adobe Media Encoder. So I'm going to hit my start key here, type in Media Encoder, and start up Media Encoder, because we've got to create some presets that we are going to use inside of Premiere. So we're going to go to Media Encoder and do that. And we're going to make a preset for each individual camera. And this gets a little confusing, but it's a necessary step. All right, as I go down, we have a bunch of presets here. I can right-click on any one of these presets to start. It really doesn't matter, because we can customize and make it our own. And what you'll notice is it's got two creates up here. It's got three creates, but the two creates that we're concentrating are creating encoding preset and creating ingest preset. This is kind of stupid. It's an extra step. I wish Premiere wouldn't make us do this. You have to create an encoding preset first for each camera, and then based on those encoding presets, you have to create an ingest preset. Just keep in mind, encoding presets are really used for just media encoder, and then ingest presets are used for the proprietary proxy workflow within Premiere. So a little confusing there, but this is solely for our media encoder, and this one is actually for proxy ingesting the ingest settings within Premiere. But you have to create an encoding preset and then create an ingest preset based off the encoding preset. Confusing as hell, I know, but that's the way they made it. So I'm going to go create encoding preset here, and we're going to do 3 of these for each camera. And a really good format to use, and PCs and Macs alike will be able to use QuickTime ProRes, which is, in my opinion, the best codec to use, and one of the smoothest codecs out there that edits really nicely. So we're going to go down to QuickTime here. We've got QuickTime under Format. Based on that preset, on the presets here, we're going to go to Apple ProRes 422 Proxy. Proxy is one of the best ones to use for proxy editing. A couple things I'm going to do here. We're going to do this for the 5D Mark III. I'm going to go to New Preset, and we're going to say 5D Encode Preset is what I'm going to name that. We do want to do video and audio. And one thing that's also really important when you're creating, it'll give you an error message if you leave 2 things in here unchecked. Right here, if you leave 2 things checked. Right here, your video and your frame rate. You need to tell it what your video and your frame rate's going to be. It cannot be based on source. So we're going to uncheck these, and I'm doing 1920 by 1080 as original resolution of the 5D Mark III, which is fine. And I'm going to uncheck frame rate, and I'm going to make sure it is the same. Mine is everything I'm shooting that I shot is 23.976, essentially 24 frames per second. One thing I recommend doing is going to effects, and just so you can tell the difference between the proxy footage and the high quality footage, I like to do a little time code burn on the window, and you can just put it like the bottom right hand corner. It's your bottom right hand corner or left hand corner, whatever you like, just to kind of get it out of the way. And opacity is 40, so it's kind of see-through, which is nice. But I'm going to add a time code burn onto my proxy footage. I'm going to go to audio and look down at the audio, and it is already as a stereo file. And we said that the 5D Mark III was stereo, And 1920 was stereo, so I think we are pretty well set there. So we've got our audio, video, and a timecode burn set for this custom preset, and I'm going to hit OK. And now notice it puts that under user presets and groups, it put my 5D encode preset right there. We're going to do the same thing. Right click on any one of these down here, say create encoding preset, and now let's work on the drone footage. The drone footage was a different aspect ratio. We're going to cut our 4K footage in half with the red, so let's do that with the drone footage as well. Since we're using 4K footage, we want to take it down to half the resolution. And this is 4096 by 2160. I'm going to cut that in half. We're going to go to 4096 divided by 2 is 2048. And then the second number is 2160. So we're going to say 2160 divided by 2, and we've got 1080. So we've got to remember that number. You can write that down if you want, and then go back and we're going to plug those numbers in and cut the resolution in half. But I'm going to go up to QuickTime, and we're going to say ProRes 422 Proxy. This has no audio, so we're matching audio properties. Very important. Uncheck audio properties. So 2048 by 1080 is what we had when we cut that video resolution in half. So if we wanted to maintain that aspect ratio, we are going to we're going to go into the video settings, and under width and height resolution, we're going to uncheck that. And this is a preset that I right-clicked on, so I happen to do 1920 by 1080, but we're going to unlink this right here, because we're going to make our own custom aspect ratio. You don't want this to lock these proportionally here, because the aspect ratio is different than 1920 by 1080. So I'm going to click on there, go to 2048 by 1080. There you go. If you keep this check mark, it's going to change these proportionally from the preset that we chose that we right-clicked on. We're going to uncheck frame rate as well, and we're going to make this 23.976. Go to Effects, and let's add our timecode burn at the bottom right. And we're set on this. I'm going to type in the name. We're going to call this drone encode. I'm calling this an encode preset to distinguish from the ingest presets that we're going to create based off of these here. So I'm going to hit OK. We've created it. And let's do the same to the red. So we're going to go to the red, select this, 3840 by 2160, 3840 divided by 2, 1920, we're cutting the resolution in half, and then of course by 2160 is going to be 1080, so 1920 by 1080, because UHD is basically twice the size of 1920 by 1080. So let's right click on one of these, go to create encoding preset, and then go down to format, QuickTime, and then ProRes 422 Proxy. This has video and audio properties, so we're going to go to our video. Let's go to video first, and we're going to uncheck this right here, and and this is already 1920 by 1080 because that's happened to be the one that I right clicked on down here. So if it was a UHD, we'd have to cut this in half, and that's already 1920 by 1080, so we're good. Going to go to audio, otherwise I would type in 1920 by 1080. So now we're going to go down to frame rate and uncheck that so we don't get any error messages, and go down to 23.976. Field order and aspect, pixel aspect ratio is just fine. You don't have to worry about those. Go to audio, move down, and we do not want a stereo. The red footage had 2 mono channels. So we're going to add a channel here, and we're going to turn this one, the top one, to mono. So now I've got 2 mono channels, and now that matches the audio nature of the red. And what you got to be careful of as well is if you're using stuff that you're recording on an Atomos recorder, other types of recorder, it might have 2 mono channels, might have 4 mono channels. If you're on a Sony camera, sometimes it's recording 4 channels of audio. Got to pay attention to that and see what the nature of it is, and make sure they're not stereo, make sure you're not putting stereo unless they are stereo. So that's very important. So I'm going to go up here under preset name. Oh wait, got to do our effects. Go to timecode burn, bottom right. Go up to the preset name, and this one is red encode preset. Hit OK, and I've got all 3 up here in my user presets and groups. So now we're going to set, now these are embedded inside of my media encoder here. These are presets created inside of my media encoder. But we need to send these to Premiere now. So what we got to do is we can right click on one of these and say create ingest preset, and it brings up a generic preset here. What it's asking is under the ingest settings within Premiere, what sort of item do you want to do here? We're not doing copying files. These are all items that the ingest feature in Premiere take advantage of here, and we are going to transcode files to destination. So this is transcoding, it's creating proxies. Right now, I'm not sure why it does this, but it basically ignores your location when you bring it over to Premiere. It doesn't do it within Media Encoder, but it does it when it brings it over to Premiere. It gets rid of your location. So you can choose any location that you want to for right now. I can even just say desktop, but we're going to change that later. And like I said, it keeps them the same within Media Encoder, but it does change it when you import them into Premiere. It gets rid of that. So, but we are going to do QuickTime here, and then under Preset. So now that now that we are under QuickTime, it'll narrow down these presets down to our. We'll go up to the top and we'll see the QuickTime presets that we've created here. Make sure you, whatever format you're doing it in, if you happen to do it under MPEG or something like that, you'd have to do MPEG, then it would show those presets. But right now we're just telling it to show the QuickTime presets. And I'm going to go up and say this one is specifically for the 5D. So I'm going to select 5D, I'm going to create, and now I'm going, because I'm creating an ingest preset, and I'm going to call this 5D ingest preset. Hit OK. And now we've got a 5D ingest preset. I'm going to do the same to each one of these here. So right click, create ingest preset. It doesn't matter what location it has at all, but now I'm going to do QuickTime. I'm going to say this one is going to be for the drone encode, and we're going to call this one drone ingest preset. Hit OK, and one more. Create ingest preset. Last one is for the red ingest preset, name it. OK. And they're all created now. Now I have to export these out and use them in Premiere because we're transferring these to Premiere. I've created the ingest presets. I'm going to right-click on each ingest preset and say Export Presets. I kind of like to put my ingest presets inside the same folder where I'm going to be putting where my project is. So right now I've got, this is where my project media is. I call it my awesome project. I go into there and I've got my awesome footage for my awesome project in here. I'm going to do two things. I'm going to first of all right click and create a new folder where I'm going to store all my proxies. Here's where I'm saving all my proxies. I don't have to put my ingest presets in there if I don't want to. So I'm just going to put them right here in my production folder. You can even make a new folder and call them like ingest presets if you want to, just if you like to keep nicely organized. Ingest presets. I'm going to save that there. That's this EPR file. I'm going to do the same to my drone ingest. I'm going to export it. Same folder. And the last one, red. Export. Same folder. Save. Okay. The rest of it gets somewhat easy from here. So I'm going to close Media Encoder. I don't need it open anymore. And now we're going to start creating proxies here. So first of all, let's start with the 5D Mark III. I'm going to select all my footage here for the 5D Mark III. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say Proxy and create proxies. It'll open up this window and it's going to ask, they already have some basic formats installed inside of Premiere. You can choose it by QuickTime and it'll have some down here that'll use it. Already has an Apple ProRes proxy, but it has its own aspect ratio. And these, keep in mind, all these that are in here have stereo audio. If you use these to create proxies out of your red footage, it's going to screw things up. If you use it to create proxies for your drone footage, it's going to screw things up. If you do it for your 5D Mark III, it won't because it has a stereo audio file. So these presets only have stereo audio. So you got to be very careful about that. So I'm not going to use any of these presets. I'm going to add my own preset. Here I'm going to add. And I can just do all three since I'm here right now. I'm going to go to my ingest presets. Here I'm going to go to the folder where I saved these, select the 5D, add that one, select the drone, add that one, add the red, and add that one. And now all three of those have been added. There's my red, there's my 5D, there's my drone. This footage I right-clicked on was the 5D Mark III, so I'm going to choose that preset for those files. I'm going to go 5D ingest preset. Now right here, notice it got rid of my destination. So I'm going to go browse, and I'm going to go to my proxy folder that I created, and I'm going to dump just all my footage. You can organize these into 5D under proxies. You can create one for 5D Mark III, drone, or red. If it's a smaller project, I just usually dump them into one folder, and it just does fine. But like I said, if it's a larger project, you probably want to create an individual folder under the proxies for each individual camera type here. But I'm going to hit select folder. There's my location for the 5D preset. I'm going to hit OK. This will open up Media Encoder. It's going to create these proxy jobs. It's going to open up Media Encoder, and it's going to start encoding these things immediately. It'll start encoding proxy files for you immediately. Here they are populating. They've got all populated, and now it's starting to encode my footage to proxies. So while that's working, I'm going to go back to Premiere. I'm going to select my DJI footage. Right-click, go to Proxy, Create Proxies. I'm going to choose for preset, my drone ingest preset. Browse location. It's the same location. I can just keep that there. I'm going to hit OK. It'll populate those items into Media Encoder. And once the 5D is finished, it added it to the list and it will start getting my drone footage. So last one is my red footage. Right click, Proxy, Create Proxies. Tell it to do the red ingest preset. Same location for the proxies. Verify that. Hit OK. My red footage has been added to the list, and it will continue encoding till all this footage is done. And if you look down here, you can see kind of faintly here, it's got a little timecode burn window burning into the video. So we're going to let that finish. We're going to come back and go through the next step. All right, inside of Media Encoder, everything is finished now. So I can close Media Encoder and go back to Premiere. One more thing I'm going to do here. So now the proxies are done. But a couple of things I want to do here is I'm going to move my mouse over in my project window. I'm going to hit the tilde key, which is the little squiggly key above the tab key, and open this up to full screen and kind of look at some of the attributes here. One thing that I want to add to my metadata here is a proxy tab. It does not show by tab, but it shows which clips have been already encoded to proxy. So I'm going to right click and go to metadata display, and within the search window here, I'm going to type in proxy. I'll bring up the proxy status tab right here. That's the one I want to check mark on. I'm going to hit OK and add that to my metadata tab up here at the top. And right now it happens to be all the way over here at the end. It puts it at the very end. But I can actually grab that and drag it over here, get it closer. Let's just drag it, bump it all the way over here to the beginning. And now it's the first tab there, and I can see it nice and conveniently that all this footage it has a proxy attached. It has been done. And I just imported this file here. If it doesn't have proxy attached to it, it just has nothing there. So I'm going to undo that, get rid of that, and all these things now have proxy files attached to it. Next thing I need to do to get ready for edit, let's go to editing here. I'm going to go to my editing layout. I kind of like the assembly layout to have a little bit more space, video space over there. But I'm going to grab, first of all, I want my timeline. Let's say I'm editing items in, let's say I'm going to be editing everything in 1920 by 1080. So I'm going to grab one of my 5D clips and drag it and drop it in here and create a timeline. I can now delete that clip because I've got a timeline created. I'm going to grab my timeline here and drag it to the left and drag it out of that folder. And there's my timeline right there. I'm going to call this final timeline or something like that. And I've got my red footage here. And one thing I did when I imported my footage under preferences, just so the resolutions match the timeline that I'm editing in, I'll go under edit preferences here and go to media. And under media, there's this option right here that I already had set, default scale, media scaling, scale to frame size. Have this just set to scale to frame size. What that does is if my timeline is 1920 by 1080 and I drop footage that is larger than that or a different size, it's going to scale it to meet the same size as the timeline there. So I already had that when I imported my footage. If not, I'd add that attribute right now, but that's not as important right now. But let's grab one of our clips here and drag it in my timeline. And I'm going to grab one of my drone clips, drag and drop that into my timeline. And I'm going to grab one of my red files, and I'm going to drag and drop that into my timeline as well. So now I've got those 3 clips in there, one from each camera. But right now, this is displaying my high-quality footage. And you can kind of tell that because when I'm trying to scrub through this, it's kind of choking and chugging and not doing so well. Especially on the higher quality 4K footage, it's not doing so well. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a button to our little button tab down here. I'm going to add this little plus button and go to the button editor. By default, it does not have your proxy button down there. And I'm going to grab, there's my proxy button right there. I'm going to grab my proxy button and drop it down here in my button editor or in my button tab down here. I'm going to hit OK, and there it is right there. Now all you have to do to access your proxy footage is just go over and click this toggle proxies. Boom, and now I got a timecode burn window. Now you know this is accessing the proxy footage, and look how quickly this and how smooth this moves now. Now as I move my mouse through this, it is just going incredibly smooth. It's just smooth as butter, and it is actually accessing the proxy footage, and I know that because it has that timecode burn window right there. So now while I'm editing, I can edit my footage down here, just hitting some keys here, doing some edits here. Now my footage is going to play back really quick. It's going to respond really quickly. And then when I'm done, I can just go back up here and say, click. And now the timecode window is gone, and it is now accessing my high quality footage. I can start color grading or exporting out. And keep in mind, even if you have your proxy footage, your proxy button turned on, when you export your footage, it just defaults back to your high quality media. It never exports out your proxy media. So. And now your editing will be as smooth as butter. It'll be a lot faster, especially if you have an older computer that you can't afford to buy a big, heavy computer that does a lot of processing with an amazing video card and processor and all that stuff. You can edit on. I still edit on my MacBook computer that's like 8 years old, and proxy footage it just does really, really well on it. So, and now one last thing here before we end. If you go under your project folder here, if you go into your project folder here and you go to the proxy folder, look what this has done. It has created all these proxies, and what it does is it has the exact same name of the file of the movie, but it has added underscore proxy to each individual file here, so you know these are proxies. They're a little bit different than the old school method. What we're going to do is we're going to cover that next and show you some of the benefits, because now what you do if you want to edit this footage, if you want to do this method, you have to make sure your computer, if you're grabbing this and moving to a laptop, you have to transfer everything you have, your high quality and your proxy. You just can't take your proxy footage, or it will have an error message while it's looking for the high quality footage. And that's one of the only downfalls of using that proxy footage and using the proprietary Premiere Pro proxy workflow method, is that you have to have all the footage there, including the proxy footage, at all times while you're so you can do this flip of the switch, and it changes from the proxy to the high quality footage immediately. So anyway, if you have any questions, please post them. Thanks for watching, and in the next episode I'm going to go over the old school proxy method and show you some of the benefits of using that.